My parents left me a dilapidated old house in a remote corner of Arizona, a forgotten estate. My younger brother, Arthur, inherited their well-kept home in Portland, Oregon. My wife, Clara, called me a weakling, lacking the guts to stand up to Arthur. She kicked me out, saying I could only return when I'd fought for what was fair. I drove to Arizona, my heart full of hurt and curiosity. I never expected that this house would change my entire life. Hello. My name is Lucas Silva, and I'm 42 years old. I work as an accountant at a small branch in Portland, Oregon. My life, if I had to describe it, is like a quiet river, calm and predictable. Yet, it's never truly vibrant. I'm not the kind of person who enjoys talking about himself, but since you're here, I'll try to help you understand who I am and why I'm standing in front of this crumbling house, holding a set of rusty keys. My heart swirls with mixed emotions. I grew up in Portland, in a middle-class neighborhood. It was filled with identical houses, white walls, red-tiled roofs, and neatly trimmed lawns. My parents, Daniel and Sophia Silva, were simple people. My father was an auto mechanic, and my mother was an elementary school teacher. They loved us, Arthur and me, but it wasn't a loud kind of love. They taught us to be kind, to yield, and to always put family first. But there was always something missing, a piece I couldn't quite name. My parents rarely spoke about our family's roots. I only knew bits and pieces gleaned from half-told stories. My great-grandfather was part of the Navajo tribe, a Native American people. They once lived on the vast prairies of New Mexico. My grandfather, Roberto, was the last in our family to hold some connection to that culture. But he passed away when I was too young to remember. My father, perhaps wanting us to blend into city life, never spoke much about my grandfather, or our Navajo heritage. What little I knew came from vague stories. My great-grandfather was a skilled hunter. My grandfather worked on a ranch near the Rocky Mountains. Our family left their ancestral lands to start anew in Oregon. I don't blame my parents. They just wanted us to have an easier life, one free from the label of different in a city where Native Americans were often met with wary glances. But sometimes, when I looked in the mirror and saw my dark brown eyes and thick black hair, I wondered, who am I really, deep down? A part of me yearned to connect with those roots, but I didn't know where to start. Arthur, my younger brother, was different. For years, my junior, he was always the center of attention. He was tall, handsome, with a smile that easily won people over. Arthur was ambitious, sharp, and unafraid to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. When we were kids, he always got the bigger slice of cake, the nicer toy, and our parents' attention. I wasn't jealous, or at least, I told myself I wasn't. I was the older brother, and older brothers are supposed to give way. But sometimes, I wondered if I was too weak. As Clara often said, Clara, just mentioning her name makes my heart tighten. We met 15 years ago at a mutual friend's party. She was the daughter of a well-off family from Seattle, a smart, decisive woman with sharp green eyes and perfectly styled blonde hair. Clara was drawn to my gentleness, or so she said. You're different from other men, she told me. You're honest, dependable. I fell for her at first sight, loving how she made everything around her come alive. We married after 2 years of dating, and her parents gifted us a small house in the Portland suburbs. It was a gift I was grateful for, but one that always made me feel indebted. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Clara worked in real estate, always busy with contracts and meetings. I, on the other hand, was content with my desk job. I liked the calm of numbers, of balancing ledgers, but Clara wanted more. She wanted me to climb the ladder, to become the strong man she envisioned. Lucas, you can't keep letting people walk all over you, she'd say, her voice laced with disappointment. You let Arthur push you around. You let your colleagues overtake you. Are you going to live your whole life as a nobody? I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to compete. I didn't want to become a version of Arthur, but each of Clara's words cut like a knife, making me doubt myself. Was I really weak? Had I let life pass me by without fighting for anything? Everything changed one April afternoon, when I got a call from the hospital. My parents had died in a car accident on the highway. A truck had lost control and crashed into their car. Remember how I drove to the hospital, only that when I arrived, I collapsed in the cold hallway, tears streaming uncontrollably. Arthur arrived after me, outwardly calm, but I saw his hands tremble as he signed the paperwork. The funeral was heavy. With grief, Arthur and I barely spoke. We exchanged only brief words about arrangements and visitors. Clara stayed by my side, holding my hand, but I sensed a distance in her eyes. Maybe she was disappointed that I wasn't showing the strength she expected. Perhaps she thought I should do or say something to prove I was the older brother. A week later, my parents' lawyer called us in to read their will. I didn't expect much. My parents weren't wealthy, and I assumed their assets would be split evenly. But when the lawyer read the will, it felt like the ground fell out from under me. Sophia and Daniel Silver leave their house in Portland, Oregon, the lawyer said in a steady voice, along with all personal assets. To their younger son, Arthur Silver, to Lucas Silver, they leave a property in Grant County, Arizona, along with all its contents. I was stunned. The Portland house was where Arthur and I grew up, filled with memories of our parents. It was well maintained, comfortable, worth $1 million in today's market. The Arizona house. I didn't even know it existed. My parents had never mentioned it, and I only vaguely recalled that my grandfather had lived somewhere in the mountains. Arthur looked at me, a cryptic smile tugging at his lips. "Guess Mum and Dad knew you didn't like city life," he said, half joking, half serious. I didn't respond, just nodded, trying to hide the sense of injustice swelling inside me. Clara, on the other hand, couldn't contain her anger. On the drive home, she exploded. "You're okay with that, Lucas? A rundown shack in the middle of nowhere while Arthur gets the entire estate. You're the older brother, and you let your little brother walk all over you like that." "It was their wish," I said, my voice quiet. "I didn't want this, Clara." Their wish. She let out a bitter laugh. "Your parents clearly thought nothing of you, and you don't even bother to fight. You're weak, Lucas. You've always been weak." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I wanted to argue, to say I didn't need the house, that I just wanted to keep the peace with Arthur, but I couldn't say anything. Maybe deep down, I was afraid she was right. That night, Clara kicked me out. She said she couldn't live with a man who didn't stand up for himself. "Go, Lucas," she said, pointing to the door. "Go to that worthless house of yours in Arizona. Don't come back until you do something to prove you're a man." I didn't argue. I packed a few clothes, grabbed my car keys, and drove off into the night. I didn't know if I was running away or searching for something. But by morning, I was on the highway heading toward Arizona. The rusty keys the lawyer had given me weighed heavily in my pocket. The Arizona house, according to the paperwork, was in a small town called Coldwater, nestled among mountains and endless pine forests. I'd never been there, but as I drove along the winding roads, I felt something strange. It was like I was returning to a place I'd never left, or maybe I was just so tired, so hurt, that my imagination was playing tricks on me. When I arrived, dusk was falling. The house loomed before me. It was a crooked silhouette in the fading light. It was smaller than I'd imagined, with peeling shingles, broken windows, and vines crawling up the walls. But instead of feeling disappointed, I felt curious. There was something about this house, a secret waiting to be uncovered. I stepped out of the car, clutching the keys tightly. A cold wind blew through, carrying the scent of earth and pine. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. This was my inheritance, I thought, and whatever it was, I was determined to uncover the truth. I stepped forward, each step crunching the gravel beneath my boots. The bundle of keys in my hand felt heavy, cold, as if they carried the weight of the past's secrets. The front door creaked as I inserted the key into the lock. I had to shove it with my shoulder to get it open. A damp, musty smell of rotting wood and dust hit me. Inside, the fading light of dusk filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating a cracked wooden floor. An old table sat abandoned, in the middle of the room, next to a brick fireplace covered in ash and soot. There wasn't a single sign of life, no lights, no pictures, no trace of a family that once lived here. But instead of feeling disappointed, I felt a strange urge. This house was whispering to me, as if it knew I hadn't come just to look, but to search. I set my backpack down and pulled out the flashlight I'd brought from Portland. Its pale yellow beam swept across the room, revealing hidden corners. The house wasn't large, just a living room, a small kitchen, and a hallway leading to a few other rooms. I walked through each one, my footsteps echoing like heartbeats in the stillness. The main bedroom was empty, save for a rusty bed frame and a dusty old blanket. Another room seemed to be a storage space, with a few rotting wooden crates scattered about. But when I pushed open the last door in the hallway, my heart began to pound. This door was different. It was made of solid oak, adorned with intricate carvings, images of eagles and suns, flowing lines like a river. I'd never seen anything like it in Oregon. My hands trembled as I tried the keys in the lock, but none of them fit. I tried every key in the bundle, but the door wouldn't budge. A mix of frustration and curiosity drove me to keep going. I swept the flashlight around the door and noticed a small gap at the bottom corner, a secret entrance, perhaps. I knelt down, touched the gap, and felt a loose wooden panel. With a little effort, I pried it open. revealing a dark, narrow space. I crawled through, my heart pounding as if it might burst. Inside was a small room, no bigger than a large closet. My flashlight illuminated dusty wooden shelves. They were lined with objects I'd never seen before. There were pottery vases with intricate patterns, hides embroidered with vibrant threads, and an eagle feather headdress with pristine white plumes in the corner stood an old wooden chest, carved with the image of a wolf howling under a moon. My breath quickened. These weren't ordinary objects. They held a deeper significance. As if they were pieces of a larger story. I opened the chest carefully, as if afraid to break something precious. Inside was a leather-bound book, thick and heavy, its pages yellowed. With age, I gently opened the first page. And handwritten words appeared. To those who carry the blood of the Navajo, preserve and cherish. Below was my grandfather's signature, Roberto Silva, and a date, August 15th, 1947. A jolt ran through me. This was my family's legacy. Not the crumbling house, but what it concealed. I sat on the floor, flipping through the book's pages. It wasn't just a diary. It was a chronicle of my family, of the Navajo people. My grandfather wrote about my great-grandfather, a warrior named Wind Spirit. He described the days when the tribe lived on the plains, hunting buffalo and performing rituals under starry skies. He wrote of the losses when white settlers came, taking their land and forcing the tribe onto reservations. But above all, he wrote of resilience. How my great-grandfather hid these artifacts, to protect them from theft. So that one day his descendants could reclaim and continue the story of their people. I didn't realize tears were streaming down my face until they dripped onto the pages. I had never felt so close to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, or my tribe. As I did in that moment. All those years growing up in Portland, I had lived as a stranger to my own roots, but now, sitting in this dusty room, I felt like I was being called by name. Not Lucas Silver, the accountant, but Lucas, descendant of Wind Spirit, bearer of Navajo blood. I spent the entire night examining the artifacts. Each one told a story. The eagle feather headdress, my grandfather wrote, was used in rainmaking ceremonies. The pottery vases held the ashes of fallen warriors, hidden to avoid destruction by the U.S. Army. A small drum covered in deer hide still produced a resonant sound when I tapped it lightly. I didn't know their monetary value, but I knew they were priceless. They were history, the soul of a people I had never truly understood. The next morning I called an old friend, Mark, an archaeologist at the University of Arizona. I briefly told him about my findings, and he agreed to come take a look. When Mark stepped into the room, his eyes lit up like a child discovering treasure. "Lucas, do you realize what you're sitting on?" he said, his voice trembling. "These artifacts, they could be worth millions of dollars. Not just materially, but for their historical significance. This is the legacy of the Navajo, the kind of thing museums around the world would pay a fortune to own." I was stunned. Millions of dollars, that kind of money could buy back the Portland house. It could pay off Clara's debts and let me live comfortably. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I felt a deep resistance. These artifacts weren't for sale. They were too important. I knew then what I had to do. I called Mark back, my voice firm. "These aren't for sale," I told him, "but I need your help to preserve them properly and to understand their full significance." Mark was quiet for a moment, then a profound respect entered his voice. "I understand, Lucas," he said. "This is far more important than any monetary value. I'll help you. We can work with the Navajo Nation and the museum to ensure these artifacts are cared for and shared responsibly." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Mark arrived with a small team of experts. They carefully documented each artifact, their hushed tones reflecting the reverence they held for the objects. We discovered more than just relics. We found letters, old photographs, and maps. All hidden within the walls and beneath the floorboards of the house. These weren't just objects. They were fragments of a vibrant life, a testament to resilience. One evening, as Mark and I were cataloging a collection of hand-woven baskets, he spoke. "Your great-grandfather, Wind Spirit, was an incredible man," he said, turning a basket over. In his hands, he hid these not just from soldiers, but from those who sought to erase their culture entirely. "This house, Lucas, it's more than just a home, it's a sanctuary." His words resonated deep within me. This dilapidated house in Arizona, supposed worthless shack Clara had derided, was a treasure trove. That it wasn't just a physical space. It was a bridge to my forgotten heritage. I called Clara. My heart still ached from her words, but a new strength had taken root. "I'm not coming back," I told her, my voice steady. "Not to Portland, not to that life. I've found something here, something more valuable than any house or job. There was a long silence on the other end. "What are you talking about, Lucas?" she finally asked, her voice laced with confusion. I explained everything. The hidden room, the artifacts, the journal, the connection to my Navajo roots. I told her about the profound sense of belonging I had finally found. She listened, and for the first time, I didn't hear judgment in her silence. "I don't understand, Lucas," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "But if you're happy, truly happy," her voice trailed off. "We eventually divorced amicably. I sent her a substantial sum, more than enough to cover her debts. From the sale of my share of our joint assets, she deserved a fresh start, and so did I. As for Arthur, I contacted him too. He was surprised, almost wary, when I invited him to Arizona. Arrived a week later, looking hesitant as he stepped out of his car. I led him into the house, into the room with the artifacts. He walked around, his usual confident demeanor faltering, replaced by quiet awe. I handed him my grandfather's journal, opened to a page detailing their shared lineage. "This is our family, Arthur," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is what our parents didn't tell us, what they tried to protect us from, but what we need to remember." He read for a long time, his face unreadable. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. "I never knew," he whispered. "All this time, I never knew." We talked for hours that day, bridging years of unspoken words and simmering resentment. For the first time, we truly saw each other, not as rivals, but as brothers. I decided to donate the vast majority of the artifacts to the Navajo Nation, would be housed in a new cultural center, a place where their story could be shared and celebrated. I kept a few personal items, my grandfather's drum, a small woven blanket, as a tangible link to my heritage. The rest of the house, once dilapidated, became my home. I learned to live a different kind of life. I learned to hunt, to track, to appreciate the silence of the mountains. I started volunteering at the new cultural center, teaching history and language to young Navajo children. My life in Coldwater isn't predictable anymore. It's vibrant, meaningful, filled with purpose. I'm no longer Lucas Silva, the accountant, striving to fit into a world that never quite felt right. I am Lucas, descendant of Wind Spirit, keeper of stories, and a man who finally found his true home. What do you think about the idea of cultural heritage being passed down through generations, even if hidden for safety? This newfound purpose, this connection to my heritage, filled me with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The monetary value of the artifacts seemed irrelevant compared to their profound cultural significance. I thought about Clara and the house in Portland. The idea of buying it back, of settling scores, briefly flickered, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of duty to my ancestors and the Navajo people. These weren't mere objects. They were the echoes of a living history, entrusted to me. "These artifacts aren't for sale," I told Mark, my voice firm and clear. He looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, then a nod of understanding. "I understand, Lucas," he said. "What do you plan to do with them?" I looked around the dusty room, at the precious items shimmering faintly in the beam of my flashlight. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn everything I can about my ancestors and their culture, and then," I continued, "I'm going to find a way to honor them, to share their story with the world." The next few months were a blur of research and discovery. Mark proved to be an invaluable resource. He connected me with experts on Navajo culture, historians, and tribal elders. I devoured books, articles, and oral histories, learning about the complex spiritual beliefs, intricate traditions, and the profound resilience of the Navajo people. I learned the meanings behind the patterns on the pottery, the significance of the eagle feathers, and the stories embedded in the deerhide drum. I spent hours with tribal elders, listening to their stories, soaking in their wisdom. They shared tales of their ancestors, of the challenges they faced, and how they preserved their identity despite immense pressures. I felt a profound sense of belonging, a connection to something much larger than myself. This wasn't just my family's legacy, it was the legacy of an entire people. As my understanding deepened, a clear path began to emerge. These artifacts needed to be shared, but not sold. They needed to be a bridge, connecting the past to the present, and fostering understanding for the future. One evening, after a particularly moving conversation with an elder named Grandmother Willow, I knew what I had to do. I would transform this dilapidated house, my unexpected inheritance, into a cultural center, a place where the Navajo story could be told, where the artifacts could be preserved and admired, a space where people from all walks of life could learn about this rich heritage. I called Mark the next morning, my voice brimming with enthusiasm. "I have an idea," I said. "A big one." He listened patiently as I laid out my vision for the Coldwater Cultural Center, a place for education, a repository for the artifacts, a beacon of Navajo culture. "It's ambitious, Lucas," Mark said, a hint of awe in his voice, "but it's also incredibly powerful. I'm with you." Building the center was a monumental task, but I wasn't alone. Mark rallied support from the university, bringing in students and experts to help with the restoration and exhibit design. The local community in Coldwater, initially curious about the newcomer from Oregon, embraced the project wholeheartedly. Volunteers offered their time and skills, eager to see the old house brought back to life, and most importantly, the Navajo Nation offered their full support. Grandmother Willow and other elders became my advisors, ensuring that every aspect of the center honored their traditions and beliefs. They shared additional stories, songs, and even taught us some traditional dances. The artifacts, once hidden in a dusty room, now took pride of place in beautifully designed exhibits. We opened the Coldwater Cultural Center exactly 1 year after I first arrived in Arizona. The opening ceremony was a joyous occasion, attended by tribal members, local residents, and visitors from far and wide. Grandmother Willow led a blessing ceremony, her voice rich with ancient chants. I stood beside her, my heart overflowing with a gratitude I had never known. Looking out at the faces of the people gathered, I saw a new kind of vibrancy in my life, a life that was no longer a quiet river, but a rushing current of purpose and connection. I hadn't fought for the house in Portland, or for Clara's approval, but I had fought for something far more valuable: my identity, my heritage, and a future for the stories of my ancestors. And in that fight, I found my strength, not as a weakling, but as a descendant of Wind Spirit. The Coldwater Cultural Center became a testament to resilience, a place where the past lived on,